Starting a new garden is very exciting. One challenge with growing vegetables is figuring out how to keep pests from stealing your harvest. Coming up, we'll show you tips and tricks to keep even the most determined critters out. Welcome to Fresh from the Garden. I'm Joe Lample. This is a great site for a garden. There's plenty of sunlight and good air circulation, which makes it a great garden for growing vegetables. The only problem is that all the area around this garden is surrounded by deer and rabbits and other small animals that I'll have to keep out. I'll show you techniques for keeping the animals out and the harvest in as this garden takes shape. Vegetable gardens should be located in wide open sites for best results. The plants need lots of sunlight and not too much shade. If there are trees near your garden, make sure they're on the west or north side so they won't block the sun. Level ground is best as long as extra water can drain away from your plants. There are a few drawbacks to this garden site. First of all, there are trees in the area, and normally that could be a problem. But in this case, it only provides afternoon shade, and that's okay. My biggest concern is with all the animals that live in the area. Small animals like rabbits, and then of course my biggest concern is with deer. But before I handle the pest problem, let's take time to get the garden ready. My garden site is already taking shape. The land was cleared and flattened by a front loader. Then the soil was tilled to loosen the dirt packed down by the heavy machine. A picket fence was installed to enclose the garden. This fence is the foundation of the pest deterrent system I've planned. It gives the garden a finished look that'll be appealing to neighbors and visitors. I'm anxious to get started building my garden beds, but there are a couple of important steps I need to do first. One is a soil analysis. The analysis will tell me important information like pH levels, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium levels, and important trace element information. Now, in order to collect the sample, you need clean tools like this trowel or scoop and a clean bucket. To take a soil test, you need samples from 6 to 10 areas in your garden. You want to get the soil below the surface to get the most accurate results. The soil directly on top may not give a true representation of what lies beneath, where the roots will actually be growing. To take a sample, dig about a trowel full of dirt and put it in a clean pot or bucket. Repeat this process in all areas of your garden, then pour the samples onto a cardboard lid or some type of wide pan and let the soil dry out. Once the soil is dry, it's time to add it to the soil sample bag. Just remember to put your contact information on the front along with what you're trying to grow. That way the Extension Service can customize the test to give you more accurate results. Remember, the goal of the test is to determine your pH level along with any nutrient deficiencies that might exist. But by having your soil dry and mixed together, you'll get more accurate results when the analysis comes back. I'm taking my soil sample to my county extension service. You can call ahead and they'll send you a soil sample bag along with instructions for getting the best samples for your type soil. You can also buy soil test kits at your local garden center. The results are quick, but they're not as accurate as the results you get from the county extension service. When we come back, I'll tell you about my secret weapon for a healthy garden. You may be surprised that it comes from below the ground. Later, I'll show you an electric solution for keeping pesky deer out of your garden. Fresh from the garden. I'm building a garden in an area that's surrounded by four-legged pests. So far, we've cleared the plot and built this fence, and I recently got the results back from my soil test. Overall, the results are pretty good, but the soil pH is a bit low, and this garden could use some extra lime to bring the pH levels up to an area that's optimal for growing vegetables. Now, that's the first step. Add the lime because the plants will then have the best chance of absorbing all the nutrients that I'm about to put into this garden. So let's get started. I added lime to my garden soil using a broadcast spreader. This gets the lime spread evenly and at the right amount per foot. The area I'm amending measures 20 by 30 feet, and I needed 40 pounds of lime to make the pH adjustment according to my soil report. This will bring my soil into the 6.0 range. There are lots of ways to add soil amendments to your garden bed. There are two ways to buy amendments, by the bag or in bulk. Now I get asked all the time, which way is better? And that simply depends on how much you need. Some products you don't use that much of, like pelletized fertilizer. So just buy that by the bag. other products you can never get enough of, like soil conditioner and compost. So whenever possible, buy that in bulk. My local garden center sells a gardener's blend of composted manure, hardwood chips, and humus, a well-composted blend of plants and leaves. They call it soil conditioner, and it has so many of the elements my garden soil needs. I ordered a truckload to be hauled into my garden and dumped just outside my garden fence. This soil mixture has a lot to offer. See these small pieces? That's recycled wood chips, and they add structure and air pockets to the soil. All the dark dirt around it, well, that's composted manure and humus, and that will continue to break down and add more nutrients to the soil. And because all of this is composted, I don't have to worry about weed seeds or disease. I carried in load after load of soil conditioner and compost and spread it over the top of my garden. Then I used a metal tined rake to even it out. It doesn't have to be perfect because I'll mix all of the amendments in at once with a tiller a little later. This is one of my secret weapons for growing healthy vegetables. It's worm castings. Now you might ask, what are those? Well, worm castings are worm manure. They're really high in nutrients, they're light in texture, and they have no odor whatsoever. Now some gardeners think worm castings help cut down on certain diseases and repel certain insects like whiteflies. And I agree, but I'm really impressed with how well castings help plants grow. You only need 1 part worm castings to 5 parts garden soil because it's so rich in nutrients. Once I had spread my worm castings over the garden, I used the tiller to incorporate all of the amendments into the soil. The tiller mixed the soil down to a depth of 6 inches, making it loose and rich for the plants I'll be adding to my garden later on. A tiller is an important garden tool. When you use a tiller, the ground gets broken and mixed at the same time. That's what builds healthy soil. This tiller does a great job of breaking up the top layer of soil, but it doesn't reach deep enough into that secondary layer, the subsurface, and that's a really hard layer where plant roots have a difficult time breaking through. A garden fork like this does a great job of creating channels of enriched soil deep below. As I push the tines into that secondary layer, it creates holes that some of that enriched soil from above can make its way into. Piercing or aerating the ground under your loosened topsoil is known as interfacing. This means that loosened or enriched soil on the top is introduced or interfaced with a lower soil level. That's great for plant roots because they get a path of loose, fertile soil to travel through. Interfacing helps plants establish deeper, healthier root systems. It has the related benefit of faster fruiting and better drought tolerance. Now I know what you're thinking. This is a lot of work and you might be inclined to skip this step. But don't. I promise you the extra effort is worth it. Interfacing is critical for heavy clay since the ground is hard and it drains very slowly. You may not need to do this if your soil is loamy or sandy. If you can easily dig into your soil to a depth of 12 or more inches, you can omit this step. I'm feeling pretty good about the condition of the soil now, but I am anxious to get started on the beds. I have this garden divided into 4 main areas. A large open area here, which is perfect for growing tall crops that need a lot of room, like corn, then traditional raised beds. Over here, I've reserved an area for large mounded rows. You can grow a lot of crops there, but it gives me some more variety. And then right here, 4 square mounded areas, perfect for growing vining crops like melons and cucumbers. Making the beds is easy. I used string to keep my rows straight and mounded the dirt up 10 inches and used a rake to flatten the tops. Vegetables grow best in deep, fertile soil, and the easiest way to get it is by piling up your newly tilled soil into mounded growing beds. It doesn't matter if you shape it into rows or hills, the important thing is to have deep, loose soil that vegetable roots can easily grow through. This garden will produce a lot of vegetables. And I know that all the hungry wildlife that live in the area will be stopping by for a visit. But I've got some strategies to help keep them at bay. Now, there's no single pest control system that's perfect, but by attacking the problem at multiple levels, well, that'll make a big difference. And the first step is to go after the digging pest, like rabbits and chipmunks. And by installing this heavy-duty wire mesh fence around the lower perimeter, that'll make a big difference in keeping them out. To install the underground part of my pest fence, I dug a trench 12 inches deep and a few inches wide around the inside of my picket fence. I positioned the trench so that my mesh fence would hang straight down below the wooden pickets. I started at the support post next to the gate and stapled the fencing to the post so that about 12 inches went below the fence and 12 inches went above the ground. I used heavy-duty galvanized staples so that they wouldn't rust and break down when they get wet. This fence project is starting to shape up, but the work is slow going. I'd say I'm about halfway through. All the hard work will pay off, though, by keeping the pesky rabbits and all their friends out. The important thing to remember about a fence project like this is that you bury it deep enough and that you staple it every few feet to keep it secure. Once I finished the main part of the fence, I stapled more of the mesh to the garden gate. I positioned it so that the mesh drug the ground as it opened and closed. I also left an overlap of mesh around the edges. This will keep pests from sneaking through the cracks around the gate. Now that the lower fence is in place, the only thing left to do is to backfill the trench. If you live in a part of the country with deep digging critters like gophers, you might want to check with your county extension service to get the particulars on how deep to bury the fence. If you'd like more information on this critter fence, then just check out our website. It's DIYnetwork.com. When we come back, we'll tackle a high-tech deer fence that's results are truly shocking. I've also got animated sprinklers and plastic predators to show you, and it's all coming up next.
Life
Fresh from the garden. I'm Joe Lample. Today I'm showing you how to build a garden that's critter-proof. So far I've done a soil nutrient test and I've added lots of soil amendments. I've also installed an underground critter fence. But now it's time to tackle even a bigger problem, deer control. The area around my garden is full of deer, possums, rabbits, birds, and moles, so I've got my work cut out for me. I had a picket fence installed around my garden after the land was cleared. Unfortunately, it's not tall enough to keep out deer. They can jump up to 12 feet, and they're very persistent. Since I know I have so much native wildlife in the area, I've decided to call in reinforcements. Steve Pettis is an expert at keeping pests away, and he's agreed to help come discuss my options. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Joe.
Steve, I know I'll have a lot of animals that will attempt to come into my garden to steal my vegetables.
Right.
So what initial suggestions do you have?
Well, you can either exclude the animals, scare them away, or repel them with chemicals.
Okay. And I've already attempted to start that process by excluding them with a picket fence and a wire mesh fence that I've buried 12 inches in the ground.
Yeah, the wire mesh fence is an excellent idea. That'll help prevent small animals from crawling underneath the fence.
Okay, but the big animals are my biggest concern, the deer. So what suggestions do you have? Because I'm considering two options, a plastic mesh fence or an electric fence, and that's the one I'm leaning towards.
Yeah, the electric fence is probably your best option in that it actually teaches the animals not to try to enter the garden.
And the plastic mesh is just a repelling?
It is just a physical barrier.
Okay, great. Well, that confirms what I wanted to do with the electric fence. I'm anxious to get started because I want to have the fence up before I plant my first vegetables. So thanks a lot for coming.
Yes, sir.
Before you install an electric fence, check your county regulations to make sure you can use the fence in your area. Always purchase and install warning signs so that visitors to your garden will know that the fence is there and avoid it. I purchased my electric fence materials from my local fence company. I got 4x4 post, poly wire, plastic fence insulators, gate kit, a solar fence controller, 6-volt battery, and grounding rods. You can find a complete list of materials on our website, DIYnetwork.com. I also bought a voltage meter to check the current in the fence once it's installed. The fence is designed to only startle the animals, not harm them. The support posts I'm using are 4x4s that are 10 feet tall. 2 feet will go below ground, and that's a good depth for this area because it's below the frost line. 8 feet will be above ground, and that's the minimum height that you need to keep the deer out. Now, if I were using the plastic mesh, I could just use post extensions on the existing fence, but you don't want to do that with an electric fence and wooden post because you could increase the risk of shock. So instead, I'll mount these posts just inside the fence, but not touching. After the post is in the hole, I checked the height and made sure the post was level. Then I poured quick-setting cement into the hole, checked the level again, and packed dirt around the post. Once all of my posts were in, I started assembling the wires that carry current through the fence. The first step is to nail insulators to each pole and secure it at the height you need. I space my insulators 1.5 feet apart. Check what your manufacturer recommends for your application. I've decided to run 3 levels of this poly wire around the perimeter of my garden. The first level is just a few inches above the pickets. That way, if a deer comes and sticks his nose over this fence, well, he'll get a wake-up call. Now, you don't need separate wires for this. You can run 1 wire, and if you run out, then you can just tie 2 together. The important thing to remember is that you start and finish at the same point of your power source. Once my poly wire was in place, I connected the system to the power source. I chose a solar-powered charger since I don't have electricity running to my garden. I attached the solar panel to the top of the fence post, making sure it was facing the southeast to get the most sunlight. I connected all of my wires and let my system charge. Then I drove my 2 grounding rods into the ground and hooked them to the solar panel. After the system charged, I used the voltage meter to make sure all areas of my fence were getting power. Don't touch the fence with your hands unless the power is off. I also posted warning signs around my garden. You might be wondering how to turn this system on and off. Well, one way is with a spring-loaded gate release. As soon as you break the circuit, there's no longer a risk of electric shock. Another feature I like about this system is the battery backup. If I have several days of cloudy weather, I might lose the charge out of the solar panel. But by having the battery, I can maintain a constant charge through these lines. Now, if you're not totally convinced that the electric fence alone will do the job, then you can spray some old rags with a repellent device, a solution that has a very offensive odor to deer. I also ordered and installed a motion-triggered water sprinkler. To install the sprayer, I pushed the post into the ground between the garden and nearby field. Then I pointed the sensor away from the garden. It senses movement near the garden and shoots a strong stream of water around the area to chase pests away. This way, approaching deer will be squirted, and hopefully it won't spray me when I work inside the fence. All the ideas I shared with you today are applicable to any size garden, no matter how big or small. Even if you have to resort to some creative ideas, like motion-activated strobe lights or this fake owl to keep out small animals, like mice and birds. And if you're serious about keeping the deer out, there is no better solution than a physical barrier of at least 8 feet. Up next, I'll show you a clever way to keep your tools and essential supplies within reach of your garden. You'll love this handy and nice-looking garden addition, and your mailman will too. The garden. On today's Homegrown Hint, I'm installing a handy tool holder at the entrance to my garden. And you might be surprised to know that it's just an oversized mailbox. I chose this size model because of all the room that it has inside to hold my favorite hand tools. So let's get it mounted and see how it looks. I dug a hole 2 feet deep with a post hole digger to hold my mailbox post. Then I set the post in the hole and used a post level to get it plumb. I backfilled a few inches of soil and tamped it down with the handle of my shovel. I kept backfilling and tamping until my post was secure. If you prefer, you could set your mailbox post in concrete to make it even more sturdy and permanent. Now that the post is in, I've positioned the mailbox close to the entrance and facing the path. All that's left to do is insert these screws, and this is ready to use. My new mailbox is the perfect size and in a great location to hold my favorite hand tools. I placed a hand trowel, scissors, a roll of twine, some pruners, and my gloves in the mailbox. This will keep me from running back and forth from the garage each time I need to tie up a plant, tuck in some seedlings, or trim a vine. I can't believe all the work I've gotten done around the garden so far. My favorite hand tools are now close by for all the planting and harvesting I expect to be doing around here. If you have any questions about any of the projects I've done today, just check out our website. That's DIYnetwork.com. And I'll see you back here next time.